superstar guest co-host that is never exempt from any A-list. Haha. Harbaugh and Herbert versus Patty and the Fatty. And who's the Salt and Pepper Conference Championship weekend? Trust me, it will all make sense. We've got that and more. I'm Jason Fitz, and it is time for Zero Blitz. Welcome to Zero Blitz, presented by Prime. Now, over the last few weeks, there's been an objection over whether it's like, is it Zero Blitz with Frank and Fitz? I kind of got mad that Frank Schwab wouldn't put my name first, so I kicked him out. We brought somebody else in. The Exempt List Charles McDonald coming in. C-Mac, we got a lot we're going to get to. We're going to look at all of these coaching hires. We're going to look at some specific matchups in championship weekend, but I just want to start with the fact, like, I've had a really weird damn day, dude. And, like, I need to vent this to somebody. First time I get to talk to anybody other than my dog about it. Annabelle doesn't seem to have the appropriate level of, empathy here, but like, I'm this morning finished my meetings. I'm all ready to go. My hair, the girl that cuts my hair, Sarika, has been cutting my hair for years. You know how this is. Like, you got somebody that cuts your hair. You make sure. So she sends me a note and she's like, "Hey, Jason, would you mind coming in early?" I'm like, "Yeah, I wouldn't mind that at all." So I'm in the seat, getting my head shampooed, get my little luxury in the morning, feeling good about myself. When our producer Stone texted me, he was like, "Dude, you have a taping right now." I totally spaced a taping this morning. So then I'm like, you know what? It's going to get better. I get home. I'm washing right before this. It's before we're taping. I decide, all right, I should shower off the hair because we all know that, like, the little ones get down your back. You can't have that. So I'm in the shower, and like every tattoo-armed guy that, has fair skin, I'm shaving my arms because when you have tattoos, you want the tattoos to pop. You shave your arms. Cut my arm while my arm was bleeding like I'm a damn stuck pig in the shower. I'm having a day, man. I don't even know what to do. Like, the haircut went wrong. I cut my arm. I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
Well, at least the haircut doesn't look bad.
It doesn't look bad. This is fire, dude. Like, let me just look at like this. This is art. This ain't haircut. It's art. You know how it is. Like, you get that person, you love them.
I'm just saying, it could have gone worse for you. You could have also, on top of all of this, gotten a bad haircut and cut yourself and missed a recording. So you got to find the wins where you can. I feel like in a situation like this.
I needed your positivity. I needed your beacon of light in a dark, dark world. And I don't need your haircut, though, because my hair does look. Stone texted me and he said it better look like Elvis could coming in if I missed a taping for it. I was like, look, I've had the same basic hair for 20 years. Like, I haven't done anything. I am thinking of just shaving it off. I know, we'll get to football. Everybody calm the hell down. I am thinking of just shaving it all off one day, just like walk, because it's just hair. It grows back in, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I think maybe if I just like buzz the whole thing off, maybe that would make me look edgier. Like, maybe I'm a little more strict that way. I don't know. No, God, no. I get like little weird patches. No? Why?
You could definitely pull off tough guy if you went bald beard with the tattoos on the arm, but you don't want to just be bald. Okay. I think the hair suits you.
All right, let's get to football. He's probably, speaking of grown, I open it by offending half of the audience here because I want to say this with great respect. When I say Patty and the Fatty, I'm obviously referring to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And if he gets to make commercials where his fingers go after the nugs, I can finally call him out for looking like the Kool-Aid man. We all know this. But I say that with incredible respect because as a fan of the Raiders, everybody knows that in my life. One thing that I have said repeatedly is like my appreciation for the Chargers is real. When you watch the way Reid coaches an offense, when you watch the way they scheme things.
You said Chargers.
Oh man, yeah, Chiefs. Thank you. My respect for the Chiefs is real. See, the day continues. When you watch Andy Reid work, when you watch Patrick Mahomes work, it's art. Like, so I watch it and I say, I've got so much respect for it, even though will never love the Chiefs. Those people are incredible. So now the Chargers have to ask themselves, did they get their own dynamic tag team? Did they get their own duo? Did they get their great ability to take down Reeds and Mahomes by hiring Jim Harbaugh, who now gets Justin Herbert? In your mind, when you see Herbert and Harbaugh together, what's it say?
I think it's a great marriage because simply, it just comes from the standpoint, this is like the most simplistic way to boil down Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers, but like he's never failed at any stop. You go to San Diego, to Stanford, to the 49ers, to Michigan. And I know maybe the ramp up period at Michigan was a little bit longer than some of his other stops, but still, like, you got to the mountaintop of winning a national title. You had 3 straight Big Ten titles. You became kind of the big brother versus Ohio State over the past few years. And now you get to come back to the NFL and see where you can pick up where you left off, which was when he was with the 49ers, it was 3 NFC championships in the 4 seasons that he was there, which is really, really, really tough to do. I think I say this as a Falcons fan, I would kill to have that level of success over like any prolonged amount of time. Let it be 4 years. Like I've never experienced something like that. So I think it's understandable that he was a hot commodity and he's trying to get back to a spot where he has a quarterback. He doesn't have to worry about developing a guy. Justin Herbert's locked in for the next several years and probably much longer than that. So it's a good stop for him. And I can't think of anyone who kind of nailed the dismount better from college football to the NFL than Jim Harbaugh by going 15-0, with the suspension. So maybe it's like 9-0 or whatever, how many games he missed. But still, an undefeated season, beat Ohio State, win a national championship, beat the Chargers, dodge the Chargers at least, and then hit an NFL job where you have a quarterback. The only downside here is like you play Patrick Mahomes twice a year, and we'll see how that turns out for you.
I think that's all so well said by you. And also, it makes me think about the one knock on Harbaugh, and it's a knock I don't care about. Like when people talk about, he wears down an organization. If I'm the Chargers, I don't give a damn about any of that. Like if I'm only going to have him for 5 years, but it makes these 5 years incredible, I will take that all day, every day. If there's a concept that, he may not be there for 10 years, who is anymore in most NFL climates? So like at some point you got to look at it and say, I got Justin Herbert. And if I got Justin Herbert, I have an obligation to try and maximize the greatness of Justin Herbert. Now they've got some salary cap issues they're going to have to work out. They have some roster issues they're going to have to work out. Those are all fair things. It's a tough division when you look at Mahomes and Andy Reid and who they are. It's a tough division with Sean Payton in it from a coaching standpoint, at least. But man, I'm looking at it if I'm the Chargers and saying, I don't need to worry about 5 years from now. I need to worry about right now, especially in LA where being irrelevant is not an option. You needed a big name coach that could come in and make you immediately a bigger part of the conversation around the NFL. Like, I think this is a home run for Harbaugh, but also I think without question, it's a home run for the Chargers.
Yeah. And when you have Justin Herbert as your quarterback, I tend to think he's one of like the 5 best guys in the game when he's healthy. And kind of able to show the full arsenal of what makes him great. You need to be aiming a lot higher than where you've been over the past few years. So getting Harbaugh, and we'll see what they end up doing with the GM decision. And obviously, he's going to have a say in it since he was there first. But I think when you have a quarterback like Herbert and you've been kind of just stuck in the mud, or you took a swing on Brandon Staley and it didn't work, it's kind of nice to find an established commodity that already has a very, very long track record of not only success, but also kind of getting the most out of his quarterbacks. I know people have, complained about his track record of developing quarterbacks in Michigan, but that's a harder deal than I think that you would think, because it's easy to kind of help take Andrew Luck to the next step, or even like Josh Johnson for where he played at San Diego. He was obviously a wildly talented guy compared to his competition. But he developed Alex Smith, developed Colin Kaepernick, and then when he finally had someone who showed some NFL abilities in J.J. McCarthy, he won the national championship. So I think this is a home run hire.
Ooh, can I give you a conspiracy theory? Here's a conspiracy theory for you. He did not want the Washington job because a lot of people thought that'd be a great job for him, right? He didn't want the Washington job because picking second overall, he didn't want to have the painful moment of passing on J.J. McCarthy, who he's been trying to shove down our throats as being better than Brady over the course of the last several months. That would have been like the rubber meets the road moment. So he goes to a job where he already has a quarterback and he doesn't have to deal with the controversy of not selecting J.J. How do you like that for conspiracy theory?
I like it a lot. Yeah, I would agree with him. I would also rather just try. Let's see if we can make Herbert the best quarterback instead of trying to build up J.J. McCarthy from the bottom. I think it's a smart strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to oversimplify, but I've told this story before. But the first time I ever met Herm Edwards was before I worked in this business at all, and he was at this event in Nashville, and the band I was in was playing this event. We were sitting backstage, and as always, I was wearing a Raiders hoodie, and Herm's just sitting there with me. He's like, "So how your Raiders going to be?" And we just started this conversation. Nicest guy in the world, but I'll never forget. Even then, he said to me, "He's like, let me tell you something, Fitz. I'm going to tell you this. As a coach, when you got a quarterback, you're a brilliant coach. When you don't have a quarterback, you're the stupidest coach in the world." So he's like, that's always going to be the case. And I look at this, and it's of all of the conversation about, well, would Harbaugh go here? Would Harbaugh go there. Like you're a Falcons fan. Some of the conversation, should the Falcons try to get Harbaugh? The Falcons have a million things that are really good, but they don't have the one thing that coaches know they can bank on. Because if you got a quarterback, you can bank on something. And to me, there was one gig in this entire cycle that you can look around and say, yep, they got a quarterback, no questions asked. It's the Chargers. No matter what else is around them, that makes this make sense for Harbaugh. It makes it make sense for San Diego, for LA. They both get proven entities in this process, which I think is a beautiful thing. Yeah, it still isn't my heart.
San Diego. Maybe Harbaugh can finally make them be the Los Angeles Chargers, but it's still fine to call them San Diego all these years later. The only thing I would say about this marriage is probably temper expectations for year one, because like you said before, they're about $44 million over projected cap space for next year. So, and they have some free agents that they got to take care of. So you're either going to have to like restructure, or I would imagine with the new regime coming in to start cutting guys that were a part of the old thing. So if you might be looking at an offense where it's just like Herbert, Harbaugh, and some pieces. But even then, that might be enough to at least get them to the playoffs. But I think you're probably looking at like 2025 for this thing to really start kicking off for them.
Which feels, by the way, and I'm going to use this to segue to the team you love, even though we hadn't planned on talking about it, but I feel like there's a little moment here where we have to remember when coaches come in. I don't care who you are. When coaches come in, they start a deconstruction to start a reconstruction. That's just the way it works. And I think that's an important reminder to everybody, because I'll ask you as a Falcons fan, I have taken a very informal sort of conversation, and I've gone to people that I know that played for the team, people I know that have covered the team, people I know that know Atlanta well, massive Falcons fans. I've asked them all the same question. Do you, as someone that loves this organization, want Bill Belichick to be the next coach of the Atlanta Falcons? I have yet to get a yes from anybody that I think is in that circle. So I ask you, as a Falcons fan, would you want Bill Belichick to be your next head coach?
I would say yes, with stipulations. Like, Bill, I would have to say, like, Bill, you can't just come here and bring the band back together, like run have basically the same organization that you were doing over in New England, because that doesn't work. Clearly, especially on offense, like they put together one of the slowest offenses that had no juice that I can remember. Obviously, the quarterback situation was a mess, but even beyond that, like the offensive line wasn't great. They didn't really have a lot of juice at receiver. And that's a tough place to start from. But I will say, like, he still very much, to me, has the juice as like a defensive mind and a defensive play caller. Like, that is somewhere that he does provide a lot of value for teams. And he's still doing it in a way where not a lot of people are able to figure out like what to do with kind of these hybrid guys in the front and in the secondary. I think he's still got value there. But I would just say, like, Bill, you can't come here and like hire Matt Patricia to be your defensive coordinator. You're going to have to think outside the box. And I know that Josh McDaniels has some success as a track record as an offensive coordinator, but you can't tell me that right now hiring Josh McDaniels is an exciting thing for your football team, even if it would end up working out. So, I would like to have Bill just for like his ideas on defense, especially if they have to replace Ryan Nielsen, but we need some safeguards in there. Like, you can't just run the whole show. You got to think of some outside minds for yourself.
We are getting, it looks like breaking news right now as we're taping this. The Falcons are hiring Raheem Morris to be their head coach. This is, I'm going to be transparent with you guys, as we always are in this show. We just got this. It just came across our chat. So this is going to be raw and real. I'm not asking you to put it in perfect words as you usually do. Your initial reaction to the Falcons hiring Raheem Morris.
I'm a fan. I like Raheem. When Dan Quinn was fired in 2020, Raheem Morris and Jeff Ulbrich basically took over a terrible defense and made them look serviceable. I think what's nice about Raheem and the skills that he brings is he's kind of had his hand in a bit of all the types of defenses that people like to run. I mean, he helps run like Dan Quinn's defense, like that classic Seattle cover 3 that Legion of Boom made popular. Then he replaced Brandon Staley with the Rams, who runs like closer to what Vic Fangio runs, like a lot of quarters, and maybe you're not blitzing as much, but he's got his hands in all of it. And also he's coached offense too, and had some success being like a wide receivers coach in the past. So, I don't think that you necessarily need to get a guy who's going to be like the next hot shot play caller, what have you. Just kind of find someone who knows what they're doing as far as being an organized leader of a football team. And I think that Raheem can do it. And like I said before, please go get a quarterback or else none of this really matters.
I love that honesty right there. Picking where are the Falcons in the draft? I'll have to look it up real quick.
For the third straight year, they're the eighth pick.
Yeah, you're right. Picking eighth. Unfortunate thing is that I'm still a believer quarterbacks, the top three quarterbacks are going to go 1, 2, and 3, and nothing can be done to move up. But that doesn't mean that the fourth best quarterback isn't a flavor of ice cream that the Falcons particularly like. I will tell you this because Raheem's obviously been a head coach before. I always remember talking to a former NFL head coach. And he was on after he'd been fired from his second job, but he'd had some success. And I asked him about second-time coaching and what the difference was. And he said, the first time you spend so much of your career trying to get in the seat as a head coach that the first time you don't even realize you're worried about the things that don't matter. You become worried about little things that have nothing to do with really being a head coach. And it can be organizational. It can be all the way down to what kind of toilet paper is in the bathroom. You find yourself obsessing over all the wrong details. And he said when he went back for his second stint, the biggest difference was he understood what to delegate and what needed to be important to him. And I think that's an important reminder. Sometimes we hear a retread coach and we immediately think, this guy's been fired before. Well, there's a lot of situations that go into being successful. There's also a lot of situations that go into being unsuccessful. And I think when you look at somebody like Raheem, he's had the opportunity to be a head coach. Then he's had the opportunity after being a head coach to be part of successful programs. He's seen a lot. He has the opportunity to be a better version of himself, even in that job coming in. So I want to stop the second head coach narrative before it gets way too many legs that it does oftentimes in these situations.
Yeah. And the funny thing is 3 years ago, he was the interim head coach in Atlanta. So there's obviously some familiarity there, but now this is his show. I feel the same as I said before. They didn't get Harbaugh. That's fine. Don't really care who it is. Can you get me a quarterback before Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, Drake London decide to host a mutiny on the field and protest their jobs, which they would rightfully have the choice to after the past couple seasons.
Would you take Kirk Cousins, or does it have to be a young quarterback? You would take.
I would take Kirk Cousins.
All right. No
Kirk
hesitation.
Cousins in a draft pick would work for me. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, because I keep saying, for all of our teams, I guess as a Raiders fan, I don't think the Raiders are going to have access to one of the top 4 quarterbacks in the draft, no matter what they offer. So now it becomes about who you getting, how you getting them in a weird quarterback world. So, I think Kirk Cousins is one of those guys that could end up having a ton of value depending on where he wants to play. And I think the Falcons, it should be noted, for all of the things that were a little off for them this year, if you were just looking at Madden and you were asking to play as this team, there's talent in Atlanta, right? Like that's the one thing I think gets forgotten sometimes. I don't necessarily love the way some of that talent was used, and I didn't love Desmond Ridder. I argued with Harry Douglas for months about Desmond Ridder. I didn't love Desmond Ridder coming into the year. I love you, Harry, but I didn't love Desmond Ridder, right? So I think at some level, just acknowledging that competent quarterback play would have made this Falcons team a playoff team is at least an important part of this.
Well, yeah, man, you talk to people around the building during the season. Like there was a point before the bye where they had the Cardinals. It was Kyler Murray's first game back. The Titans. They had the Vikings game where Josh Dobbs played in that game, and they were looking at it like, hey, we got a 3-game stretch going to the bye where we would feel pretty good about our chances of winning these games. And they should, because they had a baseline of talent and the defense was much improved than Ryan Nielsen, and things were moving in the right direction. And they lost all of those games. And they lost a bunch of games to a bunch of bad teams. So I think they're playing, I feel pretty confident saying they're playing well below their talent level last year. I think the most baffling thing was their run offense was awful by the end of the season. I think by efficiency and some EPA metrics, they're a bottom 6 run game, which is not what you expect to see when you add Bijan Robinson to what was a good run game the year before. But I think this is a good start for them, and I'm interested to see what Raheem can do in his second stint as a full-time head coach, and I guess his second stint as the Falcons head coach, because he was the interim just a few years ago.
Does this mean Belichick's not getting a job this year?
I think so, because the Falcons were the only team that interviewed him.
I mean, and just looking at what's left that's open, there doesn't seem to be that if his goal is to immediately turn around and win games, I'm not sure there's anything that sits here and just screams, like Seattle moving on from Pete Carroll wouldn't make a lot of sense to then go to Bill Belichick, right? So even though we could win games maybe in Seattle, like that doesn't make a ton of sense. So I feel like we're at that spot now where we should just openly admit that Belichick's not getting a job this cycle.
Yeah, he's not, and maybe he'll get one next year, but I think we've kind of been trending here, right? Because the Falcons were the only team that had him in their sights. And it kind of seemed like sometime last week they decided to move off that and interview like 15 people. And now they've ended up with Raheem Morris. And we'll see how his marriage with Terry Fontenot and Rich McKay and Arthur Blank kind of unfolds, because this is a pretty pivotal offseason. Like we said, they have some talent. I would say they have more than enough talent needed to win the NFC South already on the roster. Just find some baseline quarterback play. You got to nail the offensive coordinator hire too.
Dave Canales, by the way, the Bucs offensive coordinator, speaking of quarterbacks, really has made his money reviving careers, right? Like his work with Baker Mayfield this year particularly has been incredible. He signs a deal to become the new Panthers head coach. It's only interesting to me because it shouldn't have come out of left field, but it sort of felt like it came out of left field because Canales wasn't getting the same level of hype some other guys were getting. And do you like this fit, especially for Bryce Young?
Yeah, I like the fit. I mean, you got to be realistic too if you're the Panthers, like based on how the past few years have been run for you. It might not be easy for you to go out and get the top guy on the market. Like we heard back, I mean, maybe even before the end of the season, that like if Carolina wanted Ben Johnson, they were going to have to put up like an unreasonable amount of money to get him. The saying all money ain't good money. I think there are probably some people who were part of the Panthers last year who would agree with that sentiment. But I think for where they are as a franchise, which is, to be quite frank, like your offense is horrendous. You don't have a first round pick. You have free agents that you need to settle with. You're not, overflowing with cap space this year. And you have to sell people on this being a credible operation, in which it really doesn't look right now. You could have done worse to Dave Canales. Like, I think that this is probably a fast rise for him, but it's probably like the right spot for him at the same time when you think about the fact that Carolina is probably going to have to take a swing at a little bit of an unknown factor. But hey, he was there in Seattle for the Geno Smith resurrection. He helped Baker Mayfield get his career back on track to the point that the Buccaneers are openly talking about trying to get a contract with him done this offseason. Seems like a good spot to me. We'll see what happens when he has like the full responsibilities of being not just only a play caller, but also running everything else on game day. But just based on the framework of what he's accomplished, I think it's a pretty good idea. I would just want to know, does he have a promise from David Tepper that he won't get fired after 1 year? Because they're so far away. Like, think about how bad the NFC South was this year. They were barely able to compete in that division, and they only had the only win they had in the division was over the Falcons. Funnily enough, but still, like when you go 2-15 in a division where the division winner was 9-8, and you almost had an 8-9 team go to the playoffs, it's going to take a couple of years to get the thing moving back.
I would argue that they're in every bit as bad a spot as the Lions were when they went winless for a season. Like it's just, It's sort of lost, especially because they don't have the draft capital moving forward, at least this year. To your point, though, one thing I like about this hire is that it doesn't come in with immediate expectations. So even as a fan base, you're like, yep, all right, we're on the long haul. The question is, can we get more out of Bryce Young while we sort of develop this thing? Like, this is slow and low. This is barbecue over here. Like, There's nothing, no pressure cooker.
I was about to say, it shouldn't come with immediate expectations. It shouldn't.
That's fair.
But we're dealing with someone who, over a multitude of arenas my parents are in Charlotte. I'm from Charlotte, not originally, but I would say that I'm from there just based on the amount of time spent there growing up. David Tepper is not a well-liked person like in that vicinity. It's not just running the Panthers to the ground. It's also the training facility fiasco that they had in Rock Hill. When he first got there and he bought the Charlotte FC team, they had some issues where he fired their inaugural coach halfway through the season, even though they're winning a bunch of games. So he's not always the most popular guy. I think he needs to kind of take a step back and say, things are screwed up right now. really screwed up because he's basically spent 5 years kind of chipping away at assets trying to get a quarterback. Because you remember, signed Teddy Bridgewater, they traded for Baker Mayfield, they traded for Sam Darnold, they traded up for Matt Corral, they traded up for Will Grier, and then they ended up trading up for Bryce Young. Like, that's a lot of assets where you're kind of chipping away at what you can build to the rest of your team. Dave, I know you're listening to this podcast. I know you're a big fan. This is like a 3-year deal, bro. So you got to give Canales and Dan Morgan some time, but that's not a guarantee based on what we've seen over the past couple of years of him.
I love this, though. Like, to be honest, I often say we as fans sit here and we scream and yell at our favorite teams. But when everything changes constantly and one thing doesn't, eventually you have to look at that one thing. And that's usually the owner. Now, what do you do when your owner's bad at evaluating talent, when your owner is too heavy-handed, when your owner's bad at hiring, all of these things? How do you fix that? There isn't an easy answer. And, oftentimes we see fans that are angry come in and say, well, make them sell the team. And it doesn't work that way. If your favorite restaurant gets run into the ground by owners, you don't get to go to the owners and say, sell the team. Like, it just doesn't work that way. But you can have at least your voice of accountability towards that person. And what I love about what's happening for Carolina right now is that whatever happens with this situation moving forward, the problem has been loudly identified, and it's Tepper. If he's going to be the one through point here that's always going to be part of an organization that mostly right now sucks, then I want him to have some accountability, him to have some fire. Like, I want that to start going to his feet instead of everyone that works for him, because I think that's probably better placed aggression from the fans.
One thing that Tepper needs to be real with himself about this offseason is, okay, your imperative beyond all else is getting this supporting cast to a point where you can resemble an NFL offense. Because for people, if you forgot, I'll give you a secret. Panthers over the last 2 games, they scored 0 points. 0 points, right? So that's really not acceptable, quite frankly, in the NFL in 2023. But let's say you're a T. Higgins, right? And you're about to hit free agency, or you're another star offensive player to, about to hit free agency and have teams bidding over you. How much would it cost for you to go to Carolina right now? Probably an amount of money that it would be irresponsible for them to offer you just based on the cap space. So let's just hit some home runs. Let's get on base. Like, I remember when it's kind of different situations because the cap was messed up for the Falcons. But like when Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith first got there, they just spent the entire offseason just checking off little one-year deals, like where we can add some credibility. You go sign this Cordero Patterson, you find some other guys that can kind of just get you looking like a football team again. I think that needs to be the goal for them. You're not going to make the playoffs. You're not going to win the Super Bowl. Let's just get on first base, Dave.
I love the idea of the Panthers going to agents around the NFL and just saying, hey, we're going to do you a solid. We're not even going to offer your client because we know it'd be insulting to him, and we're going to suck for a minute. So since we're not going to offer him, just give us a little love when we do in a couple of years. Like, we're going to build the right foundation, then we will bother you. Because you're right, T. Higgins is going to get generational wealth somewhere. It doesn't have to be Carolina. So how much more would they have to pay to actually make that happen? Well, here's what I know. I know that we will continue to get all the reaction on Yahoo Sports that you could ever need to all of these hires as they come down the pipeline. Make sure you're hanging out in the app. In the meantime, I promise you we will get to the actual games this weekend, and we're going to do it in a much different way than most people. We're going to give you trios. Trust me, you do not want to miss it. It's coming up next. Talk to me about trios. And I was thinking about this in the car, because here's what we're about to do with the conference championship. We're going to go for 3 matchups for each game we like, which has me thinking about trios. And, like, I love P.F. Chang's trios of sauces. If you ever eat at P.F. Chang's, like, you get the pot sticker sauce with the hot mustard and the little, like, hot Chinese hot sauce. You got to ask for it now. But, like, trio of sauces, I'm all in for. But, like, actual trios, I think of great trios in history, like Three Amigos. I don't know. Salt and pepper counts as a trio, even though it's just salt and pepper. Like, is there a great trio? When I say great trio, C-Mac says
Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Roddy White.
See, and this is a weird, by the way, like cultural difference in music. Country music's all about trios, like the Dixie Chicks, Rascal Flatts. Like, for the longest time, you wanted to get a record deal, you just formed a trio. Like, other genres are not as, like, you got boy bands and pop. There are 5 of them. They're not trios. Like, what was Hanson was a trio. I don't know. Like, but then you particularly to go to hip hop, R&B, not a lot of trios. Like, trios aren't really the thing. Boys to Men did not start out as a trio. It should be noted. So like they're the exception. They started as 4. Now they're 3. They don't miss me on the trio because that's not how they started. Because there just aren't that many great trios. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you trios here, and we're going to give you a trio of matchups. 3-player matchups we're looking for in each of the championship games this weekend. I want to start with the game that is first versus last. If you're not first, you're last, only in the sense of quarterbacks, right? This is the Jared Goff versus Brock Purdy game, but let's acknowledge that since Jared Goff and Brock Purdy will not actually play each other, we will give you matchups of people that will. So give me one. Like, what's the first? When I say Lions 49ers, the first matchup that has you go, ooh.
I should start with the disclaimer. I was a lineman my entire life. I played offensive line, defensive line in high school. I played only defensive line in college for the couple years that I played. So I always tend to look at that area of the field first. And the Lions offensive line to me is like one of the coolest things in sport, just with how they blow people off the ball routinely and how basically the whole function of their offense is based around having just a complete kick-ass offensive line. And obviously that goes well against with the group that the 49ers have assembled up front with Nick Bosa and Ark Armstead and Javon Hargrave and some of the depth pieces that they traded for. I think that like Penei Sewell versus Nick Bosa or Penei Sewell versus Chase Young, like on the edge, that's where this game is going to be pretty exciting to watch because like that's a blue chip matchup right there. And also like, is it going to be imperative for the Lions' chances to win? Like if Jared Goff, like he's a guy that when he gets knocked off his spot and has to become like a playmaker behind the line of scrimmage, that's not really a good space for him. So Sewell is going to, and not just Sewell, like the whole rest of the Lions offensive line, that's going to need to be a spot where they kind of kill it this weekend because Jared Goff needs that. But if Jared Goff can get that time and, they're kind of blowing guys off the ball in the run game, I think there's a lot of space for the Lions to score here and try to keep pace with the 49ers.
I was talking to our buddy Mike Golick Jr. a couple of days ago about the Lions offensive line. And there was a play in the last game that you may remember. They showed the replay like 300 times. Sewell starts on the right, and he's actually pulling. And he's got to get all the way to the left to pull, and he just blows up the entire thing to make the hole for the running back. That turns out to be a big play. And I kept watching that thinking like, A, that was like thick with 2 C's, thick porn, because like just watching him run that fast was insane. But B, and this is like the number of times people my size, 5'9", 165, right? Like people my size are sitting there yelling about offensive linemen and what they're doing right or wrong. Like I think it's hysterical because Sewell reminded all of us that he's like 300 pounds of girth and he can absolutely outsprint any of us going left to right. Like most of the fans that are going to scream about the offensive line, if they had to run to save their lives, could not outrun Penei Sewell. I just think that's one of the most incredible athletic feats. Like for somebody that size to be that nimble, that fast, and be able to charge that quickly left to right on the field, just shows you a level of athleticism that most of us will never understand.
Yeah. Don't even, like the line play discussions on the internet. Like there's so much context and like rules missing because like, I think that honestly, sometimes like pass protection can be one of the most difficult things to kind of to learn. Like we see players in the games mess up on it all the time. So it's frustrating. Like even this week with the Bucs Lions game, like there were a couple plays where, if you kind of know what you're watching, like some of these sacks are on the quarterback or they're on a wide receiver. They're not necessarily on the offensive line, but that's a whole different discussion for another day. But I think in this specific game, the matchup in the trenches for the Detroit offense is going to be huge because, like, low key, 49ers defense this year has not been as stalwart as it has been the past couple of years. And like, just to turn like my defensive line, like nerdy brain on for a quick second, the 49ers, like their defensive front, they don't like to just sit up and hold blocks and allow their linebackers to make plays. Like they want to make the plays themselves too. So like they're really aggressive getting up the field and trying to collect TFLs and explosive plays in the backfield. But what that leaves you open for is kind of getting gashed behind if you don't make that play or you find yourself in the wrong gap. And that's kind of where the 49ers have been hurt this year in some of their production in their run defense. And we know that when the Lions start getting going and they can run the ball and really kind of start mashing, that's when the play action game starts popping off for them. And that's when they turn into a team that can score 30 points on just about any defense.
Well, and that leads me to the linebackers because I know you love this this matchup of Warner, the Lions superstar linebacker for the 49ers, versus either of the running backs for the Lions, right? Like that due to what you're talking about, it feels like that becomes a huge matchup.
Oh yeah. And like, I think you have to like classify Gibbs and Montgomery together because like Fred Warner has the skill set to play against both of them. That's why he's, the only linebacker that people talk about in the same realm as Fred Warner now is Roquan Smith, like for a reason. They're kind of the two top guys because they can do just a bit of everything. He has the power to stop David Montgomery. He has the speed to kind of get after Jahmyr Gibbs in the passing game. He's got the smarts to be a great coverage player. So like that's going to be paramount for them too. And not just Fred Warner. It's going to be Dre Greenlaw. He's going to have to play, the other linebacker who's going to have to play a big role in that too. So it's just kind of fascinating. Like this game can be totally won and lost for Detroit within like that front seven box because I don't really have a whole lot of faith in them to be able to stop the 49ers offense. Defense hasn't really been Detroit's strong suit. And I would say like they're in the bad spot where it's more personnel based than coaching based because Aaron Glenn, who's gotten a bunch of head coaching interviews this offseason, like I think he's really good in terms of calling plays, but sometimes he doesn't have the horses to get things done. And if there's one thing the 49ers offense has, it's the horses to get just about anything done. So Lions offensive line, running game, the play action shots that they take, that's going to be like imperative to give them a chance to win this game because it's going to be tough sledding on the other side.
Yeah, it honestly feels, again, I'll use the Madden analogy, but if sometimes when you're playing somebody that's great at Madden, if you force them to punt, you feel like you've just won the whole world. I feel like in this game, anytime the 49ers punt, there's a collective sigh of relief you'll hear all the way from Detroit of just like, okay, let's see. Because you're right. The defense is going to have their hands full, which leads us to, of all the weapons for the 49ers, it's really hard to figure out which one you like the most. But give me one matchup on the offensive side for the 49ers that you've got your eye on, like one of in our 3-player matchups, the one matchup in the offense that you like.
Well, it's kind of tough because for the Lions, I don't really see a whole lot of answers here. Like when you look at the wide receiver talent to the cornerback talent, heavily slated towards the 49ers. You'll get the running back talent to the linebacker talent, heavily slated towards the 49ers. I mean, there's a reason why, not to even get into the Brock Purdy discussion, but there's a reason why like the last pick in last year's draft can have this amount of success because he's playing with like an absolutely loaded roster filled with players. But if there is one spot where they can match up and have a chance of like erasing one of the Avengers, I think Brian Branch matched up on George Kittle is kind of an interesting look. Brian Branch, one of Detroit's like superstar rookies, where I gave them an F for their draft grade and kind of got roasted all week, which was fine. It's just the internet. It is what it is. But if you
though, like let me just say this. I was covering the draft last year for ESPN. The amount of hate the Lions got, the only thing that I think saved some of us was at the end of the draft when you actually looked at the names. I remember sitting next to Field Yates at the time, and we'd all been tough on the Lions in the first round particularly. And then by the end of it, feels like when you look at this, it's actually a pretty good draft class. He had the foresight to see that. I don't think a lot of people did. Like, I appreciate that you took getting roasted with the grace and charm that you do. But I think, it's a little bit revisionist history for anyone to come in and be like, 99% of the people that cover the draft had something to say about that draft class.
Yeah. But they got some studs like Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Brian Branch. Like that's a hell of a haul.
That's a home run. It's a home run.
It's a home run. And I think when you start looking at Brad Holmes' draft history, because he's been there since 2021. So like I think in his first draft they got Penei Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Last year they got Hutchinson, some other guys. Like he's kind of earned his stripes as someone who should be kind of trusted on his draft pick selection at this point. And Brian Branch, like if they're going to have a chance to slow down the 49ers offense, like taking away George Kittle is going to be paramount. I don't know if Brian Branch can like totally do that because George Kittle is one of like the last elite tight ends that we have in the NFL today, but he's going to be their best chance because like I said before, there's just so many mismatches personnel-wise for the 49ers offense in terms of looking at the Lions defense. You're kind of just hoping that like Aiden Hutchinson can get back there and make enough splash plays to disrupt things because it's going to be a tough out for them, I think.
Without having the same Brock Purdy conversation that everybody's had, I want to couch this carefully. Listen, don't react yet. To everybody that's listening and screaming already their Brock Purdy opinion, sit down, shut up, color your book. Hold on one second. I just want to say, I think it's fair to say, hey, Brock had a pretty rough game, finished by an absolutely incredible drive. Like, I just wish that could be the take. I wish the take could be whether it was rain or whether it was nerves or whether it was accuracy or whether it was just a bad day. It was a pretty bad game at different times, and it was a pretty great finish to it. Like, I know there's no room allowed for nuance in the quarterback conversation, C-Mac. I just wish we could just shut up with the hot takes on it for a second and just be like, yeah, no matter what you think of Brock one way or the other, for 3.5 quarters, it was a rough game. And at the very end, it was a work of art. Congratulations. Kudos to him.
Yeah, well, the problem is we've become so quarterback centric at times that to me, it's become a testament to like what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have built over there, because the Packers over the past 2 months, they've been absolutely shredding people. You know, I know they squeezed into the playoffs as the 7 seed, and you know they upset the Cowboys in the first round. But if you start to like isolate their stats from just the back half of the season, you could argue that was the best offense in football, or at least the best passing game. So the fact that Brock Purdy could play that game that he did for 3.5 quarters, and you're able to just hold on long enough for him to get that drive at the end of the game, to me, that just speaks a testament to the 49ers as a whole team. We don't need to get stuck on just, you know, this quarterback versus that quarterback. You survived what had become one of the most terrifying offenses to play in football for 3.5 quarters, just barely by the skin of your teeth, because, you know, there were opportunities for like a pick six where maybe the game would have been out of reach late in the game. But still, 49ers as a whole, like this team is very, very strong. And I think that them being strong has allowed Brock Purdy to kind of develop into a quality starter. It's a whole ecosystem here.
Call me polypositive, but like I did a essay for like a long form video piece for Yahoo this week about the underappreciation. We seem to have something negative to say about every one of these quarterbacks. I'm not doing it. Like if Mr. Irrelevant can turn around and become what he is right now, that should be a beacon of light in a dark, dark world for everybody, right? Like if Jared Goff can be given up on by a franchise and turn around and do what he's doing, that's reason for hope for every team that needs a quarterback, can't find it in the draft. If Lamar Jackson can be what we presume a 2-time MVP, we should be looking at it and saying, oh my God, we're watching Lamar play. And I don't care if Mahomes is better than Tom Brady. I don't give a damn. Like, I just want to appreciate 4 quarterbacks playing at a high level. Oversimplification, C-Mac.
Yeah. Oh, well, last point before we dismount off of this. The quarterback conversations over the next, like, let's call it 5 years are going to be rough, because all of them are in the AFC right now. And they're not going to be able to get to a Super Bowl without interacting with each other. And more importantly, interacting with Patrick Mahomes. So we're about to get some pretty, like, good rivalry games. Joe Burrow's going to be back next year. Aaron Rodgers is going to be back next year. We'll see how those guys fare out. But like when you're talking about the divisional round was Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, you can like even expand that to we'll see what happens next year when some of these guys get back. That's going to be really fun to see who ends up being like the guy who's, you know, the last man out on some of these hot takes, because everybody can't win, and there's going to be some bad losses for some really good quarterbacks.
Yeah, and wins and losses aren't a quarterback stat. Just ask Dan Marino. Didn't get a Super Bowl. All right. I'll get off my high horse for just for 1 second. Speaking of quarterbacks, we got the great matchup of Chiefs at Ravens. Before we get into your specific matchups, I want to tell you the story because I think you'll appreciate it. I was talking to Dominique Foxworth a few days ago, and he was talking about this Ravens defense. And he said, you know, the thing that stands out when you watch them is they just don't make mistakes. They swarm to the ball, and they're fundamentally sound. And he pointed at the time to a triple option play that the Texans tried to run against them that had worked against the Browns, and it didn't even come close to working against the Ravens because the Ravens don't make mistakes on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that's such an interesting part of this game, because I know like when you start talking about matchups for the Chiefs and we talk about an offense that has been weird this year, it immediately makes me think Kelce. And Kelce is made a living finding soft spots in the zone, finding a place where he can sit down and just get the ball. It'll be interesting to see, because I know when you talk matchups, you got to be thinking about Kelce against somebody, right?
Oh, Kyle Hamilton. Like I don't know how to describe Kyle Hamilton. Like one of my buddies called him like a pterodactyl in the box. because it's so unusual for a player of his size to have the skill set that he does. Usually when you're thinking like 6'4", 215, 220-pound safety, you're thinking someone who's just like a bona fide, or, not a bona fide, but glorified linebacker out there. But no, like he can play deep. He can play in the box. He can blitz off the edge. He can match up in coverage against tight ends because he has the skill and the size to kind of combat that. So the hard part for me in thinking about this Chiefs-Ravens game is, I know it's impossible to think about, but if I pull away Patrick Mahomes, right, and I just give you the Ravens defense versus the Chiefs skill players, sans Patrick Mahomes, I'll be, oh my God, they're going to smother these guys. Because if Kyle Hamilton can just keep up with Travis Kelce, and like I know that athletically he can do it, but there's still some old man savvy stuff that Kelce's picked up that makes him a really talented receiver. And also just like the whole coordination of the offense is going to get him opportunities to touch the ball. But, that's going to be pretty key for him because like if Kyle Hamilton can shut down Travis Kelce, like where are the explosives supposed to come from against his defense? This is a big step up from what the Chiefs saw in Buffalo last week. And I'm sure now that I'm saying all this, I'm going to look dumb as hell come Sunday when the Chiefs have averaged 10 yards a play and they won like 34-20.
But this is the thing that's like, it's just wild. Just from a human standpoint, like we've spent most of our lives watching football, right? And at some point in a season, if a team's good or bad. And there have been multiple times in the season just watching the Chiefs, you're like, yeah, they ain't that good. But it hasn't mattered because Mahomes has been that good. And while Mahomes was being Mahomes and keeping this whole thing afloat, Rashee Rice was turning into a bona fide receiver. Like he was developing into a better player than he was earlier in the year. Isiah Pacheco started running better and better and better. And like, I'm just looking at this saying, if you can't beat this version, like if this version of Mahomes and Andy Reid wins the Super Bowl, then the rest of the NFL should just take the next few years off, drink too much, and come back in like 3 years and see if they have a chance. Because like, if you can't beat this version, you ain't beating any version. This is not a great football team, and it doesn't matter because they're a great football team with Patrick Mahomes.
Right. Look, 15 on the field, anything's possible. And this is the best defense that Mahomes has had, but like, it's hard not to watch the offense this year, when they go to Denver and score like 9 points where they lose to the, no offense, but like Aiden O'Connell and the Raiders towards the end of the season. It'd be hard. It feels like dumb to say now, but like it felt hard to see them making it this far at that time because it didn't seem like they could score. And then, they scored 26 points on Miami in the absolute freezing cold. And then they averaged like literally, I think 8 yards a play versus Buffalo, and they were Mecole Hardman away from scoring almost 40 points. Like, they're back. And I think that, but this is also a much tougher test for them than they've seen in the past few weeks in terms of Baltimore's defense because they're healthy. Marlon Humphrey's coming back this week, and Kyle Hamilton, Travis Kelce, that's probably going to be the matchup people want to circle.
Yeah, and I will say this. I said this on this show earlier this year, even when everybody was ready to give up on this Chiefs team. It was like, well, I don't know. They lost week one without a couple of their best players. They lost a freaky, should have had that touchdown catch game that would have been a difference. Like each of these losses had like one or two weird plays. That's the magic. He is, at this point, he's a magician. Like Mahomes is a magician, and I've just learned to accept it. And it's different than what we're used to seeing because the fact is he beats you in so many different, you don't have to make a mistake. There are the type of quarterbacks that will beat you because, hey, you lined up wrong. You didn't read the play wrong. You didn't do the right thing. Even when you do everything right and you are taking on Mahomes, there is a chance he's going to make you look stupid in the process. That's just wild to me, C-Mac.
It's a guarantee. It's not a chance anymore, Yeah. Look, they have dealt with some like the dumbest wide receiver play that I've seen in a long time.
You're right.
Just in terms of like guys running the wrong way, drops at crucial points, because they're like 3 catches away from being the number 1 seed again and hosting another AFC title game. But, I guess the fact that he has to go on the road is a small thing to add to an already sterling reputation of his. And he's gotten to the point where, look, if he's on the field, it's probably going to work out for them. And I just want Chiefs fans to realize how blessed they are that like the worst version of a Patrick Mahomes offense still gets you to the AFC title game.
I also want to point out a stat I heard earlier today. In his entire career, he's only lost 4 games by more than 1 score. Only lost 4 games by more than 8 points. That's just stupid. All right.
Player.
So you mentioned Pacheco earlier. I mentioned Pacheco earlier. This Pacheco versus Roquan matchup seems like it's going to be key and interesting here, right?
Yes. They've kind of gotten back and forth on through the press conference airwaves. I'm well, going back to the Travis Kelce and Kyle Hamilton discussion, if they're kind of struggling to get plays off in the passing game because the Ravens secondary and their cover scheme is a little overwhelming, this is a spot where maybe they can have some success and kind of get things moving because, Pacheco, he's kind of got to a point where you trust him against a lot of fronts to try and do some tough running and get upfield and make some tough yards that have kept life a little bit easier for what's been a struggling or inconsistent Chiefs passing game this season. But Roquan Smith, man, like I would still have to give him the upper hand in this one. Just because, like I said, when we were talking about Fred Warner, it's like Fred, Roquan at linebacker, and then everybody else. That's one of the few linebackers that you can get away with paying a 5-year, $100 million contract, and it doesn't feel like it's hurting your team because he really is that good and he's been that dominant of a player. So that's going to be a huge matchup for them. And and not even just like from a running ball perspective, but also in the pass game because tackling open space, that's something Roquan Smith does really well. Making guys miss in space and running over guys is something Pacheco does well. So I think this is kind of like a big on big matchup that should have some entertaining matchups throughout the game based on how these guys have been chirping at each other through the media.
I'm also interested to see the running game. And I just looked up the weather to make sure I wasn't wrong. Like the weather's going to be normal for this game. Like we almost take for granted. We've seen 2 straight games that were played essentially on a block of ice in the middle of chaos, right? Like I'm interested to see 2 guys that are just, and everybody we've been talking about so far hits so hard. I'm just glad it's going to be like 50 degrees, a little light rain, or maybe possibly like there's some much better conditions for all of these guys to be at their best. But Pacheco, I thought particularly on the, on blocks of ice has run particularly well over the last couple of games in the playoffs.
That's going to be a key for them because they don't have a whole lot of threats. They don't have a whole lot of players that should threaten this Baltimore defense. They're not nearly as banged up as the Bills were last week, where you're missing multiple starters from where you thought you were going to be week 1 and even from like a few weeks ago. So they're going to need some of the easy yards that Pacheco can hopefully get a little easier said than done. But, the Ravens defense, like they've had moments where they're gettable for very brief moments in times. And those moments where Pacheco can kind of get upfield or maybe even create an explosive run here or there, that could be the difference for them because, like I said, like I've been saying, it's going to be tough sledding for that Chiefs offense, even with 15 back there.
All right, so let's go to the other side of this. What's a matchup you like for the Ravens offense? You're excited to see the Ravens offense versus the Chiefs defense.
Well, when Todd Monken got hired, they spread it out. They've got Zay Flowers. They added Odell Beckham. And it's led to me, like easily the best performance that Lamar Jackson's had as a passer. Like, I think that this year has kind of vindicated people who've been saying that he could do this for quite some time. Obviously, he's still going to run the ball because he's Lamar Jackson. Why would you not have him run the ball? But he averaged like a career high in yards per attempt, was back to throwing over 20 touchdowns, sub 10 interception season. And, Zay Flowers had a lot to do with that. So he had a great rookie season. He's been someone they've been really excited about. Like I remember going back to training camp when I went to Baltimore. Like I don't even think they had put pads on. They only been practiced for about 2 days, and they were like, "This kid's got it. He's special. He's something else." So he got the nickname the Human Joystick like by day 3 of training camp from Lamar Jackson. I think when you watch him, that fits. It really does track for him. So he's got a tough matchup this week, though. L'Jarius Sneed on the outside, one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. Trent McDuffie as a slot. I think he was an All-Pro this year as a slot defender. So they like to move their receivers around a lot. That's going to be a tough matchup for him based on wherever he is. But if they can just get open for a couple chunk plays and run the ball like they've been able to, like this is going to be a tough matchup for the Ravens offense too, because the Chiefs offense attacks in ways that will make life difficult for Lamar and the rest of the offense. But I think the ability or potentially inability on Zay Flowers to win one-on-one matchups will go a long way for determining who wins this game too.
If your nickname is the human joystick, is there like brevity involved? Like, does that get like, do you shorten that to the stick or the joy or like?
It takes a little.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you shorten that. Like, it gets a little weird, man. Like, I'm just saying, human joystick, HJ. Like,
well, I don't know about that.
Yeah. I didn't even think of it, Stone. I promise. Yeah. Stone's like, oh, son of a biscuit. Okay. I mean, you definitely, you're right, though. He's got enough time while he's running down the field. Nobody can catch him. That you can say the human joystick. All right. So let's do some predictions for each of the games. AFC Championship game, since that's one we're on now, we'll start there. Chiefs at Ravens. Give me a final score. What do you think?
I'm going to go Ravens 24-20.
Ooh, okay. I like that a lot. We see the game similarly, but I see a lot more points. I think the Ravens are going to score in this one, so I go Ravens 34-31. Ravens by a field goal, 34-31. It feels to me like this is one of those games where the Ravens are up by more than that, and then there's a touchdown at the end, and we're like, Mahomes is going to do it again. Then he doesn't do it. So the Ravens go to the Super Bowl. We agree on that. What about the other side? Lions at 49ers. So who will the Ravens be taking on in the Super Bowl?
I'm going to go 49ers here, 38-28. I think the Lions will have their chances to score, but I just don't think they'll be able to keep pace with the 49ers offense in this one.
Does Debo being not 100% change your mind at all?
Not really.
Okay. That's fair. I don't know why you don't like nice things. I think America wants the Lions to make it to the Super Bowl, and the script writers going to make sure
I can't turn back now. I got to go full on with the Lions hate. You know,
I mean,
they consume my thoughts.
No, I want more than anything. I just want to be loved. So I'm going to say the Lions find a way to do the impossible. I will say this in serious analysis. I said it earlier, but I think we have to acknowledge that Jared Goff has been in these types of games before. And, you know, when it comes to huge games, for me, I have trust issues with quarterbacks holding on to the football. Turnovers are a big deal. In fact, so far in the playoffs, every single quarterback that has won has had 0 interceptions, every single one of them. So who can keep that going? I think that the Lions can get an opportunistic turnover here or there. This game goes up on its heels, and all of a sudden we are yelling about Shanahan. People are going to be freaking out about Brock, and Jared Goff's going to be in Vegas celebrating a Super Bowl. I'll say the Lions win 28-24. How do you like that?
I like it. We're on the same line score. I just think the 49ers are going to win the score quite a bit.
All right. Most importantly, you'll be in Vegas, right? So we can celebrate this together one way or the other. I mean, that's
absolutely. I'll be in Baltimore this weekend for the AFC title game. Me and Jory Epstein going up there to cover the game together, and then a little rest for a week, and then we're off to Vegas.
Oh, I can't wait. And that's going to be a heck of a time. Like the tailgating in Baltimore is fun. You should check it out. I'll be back Sunday night with Frank for Sunday Night Blitz. That. You can also, check out CMAC on the Exempt List right here in this podcast channel all the time. Follow us all on social media. Follow Stone too, at SJ Rochelle. He deserves that love. He's our producer behind the glass, and he's going to have to figure out how to get all the human joystick references taken out of this thing or beeped out. He's probably going to have to talk to standards and practices. I feel like we're Family Guy here. We're just right on the edge of whether or not it's family appropriate. We'll figure it out. And in the meantime, be sure to leave us that 5-star review. Rate, subscribe, tell your friends, your family, enemies. Tell everybody to hang out with the entire podcast channel because we're doing stuff we're really proud of here that we love. And C-Mac, I appreciate you coming in and pitching. I don't want to say, we already knew you were better looking than Frank, but I think, maybe this is like this little warning to Schwab, like maybe put Fitz in front of Frank and then maybe he doesn't, otherwise, I don't know. He could be Wally pipped here.
Frank, I love you, but shots fired.
Yeah, shots fired. There we go. We'll be back next Thursday also with more Zero Blitz. Thanks for hanging out with us. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the games, y'all.